Must be Cruella, your dearly devoted old schoolmate. Cruella de Vil. That's it.
This is Next Door Villain.
I'm Tiana.
I'm Joe.
In this podcast, we practice empathy by discussing fictional villains.
Because if we can learn to understand characters that were designed to be hated, then we might just have a chance of understanding the real-life villains we encounter every day. So this week we're talking about Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians, and Tiana, you chose the villain this week, so can you tell us a little bit about why you chose her and what was interesting to you about Cruella?
Yeah, so a lot of the reason why I chose Cruella de Vil is because she offers up a bit of a challenge for us to discuss. She, in the films, especially the cartoon version of the film, she's kind of a one-dimensional character who has sort of this plan that she wants to do, and we're not entirely sure who she is, where she came from, why she doesn't see what she does is evil or bad to do. And then also, I've always been intrigued with Cruella ever since I was, 6 to 10 years old. When I was in daycare, and I would watch both the cartoon version of 101 Dalmatians and the live-action version as well. She always had this confident and fierce demeanor about her that I always found was very interesting. And I grew up in a rural town where a lot of people didn't strut around in stilettos, wearing whatever they want to wear, being demanding with whatever they wanted. I grew up in Midwestern nice. So 6 to 10 years old, even though I knew what she was doing was wrong and that she was a villain in this film, I was still very intrigued with her, and also kind of attracted to her because I thought, Cruella de Vil is kind of hot. And so that's always stuck with me till this day.
When you brought her up to me, I hadn't probably seen 101 Dalmatians in maybe 20 years. And
Right.
When I looked back, when I watched the film again, I was really surprised at how truly evil the film seems to try to show her. But the more I watched and thought about it, she really does seem like this really interesting character, but you do have to dig a little. So I like that about her.
Yeah, definitely. Also, she's, a fashionista, so she knows how to work it.
Yeah.
Something
For
I
sure.
haven't been able to do in 24 years. So, we have that to kind of look up to her about.
Yeah. And I think we should mention that for our conversation today, we both got a lot of our information from the 1968 animated Disney film and also the 1996 live action film, 101 Dalmatians. But both of these were based off of the original novel that was written in the 1950s by Dodie Smith. And I think, like me, a lot of people haven't seen these films since they were young. So as a little bit of a refresher, can you give us a brief summary of who Cruella is and what happens in the storyline?
Yeah. So this is definitely a spoiler alert for people who may have not seen 101 Dalmatians. Cruella de Vil steals a newlywed's Dalmatian puppies so that she can create the perfect Dalmatian fur outfits. So in the 1996 movie version, Cruella de Vil is shown as the head of an haute couture or fashion house that designs upscale clothing. And in both films, in the cartoon version and in the live action film in 1996, she's obsessed with wearing animal fur. So that kind of gives you understanding of her motivation for what she does. This story takes place in London. Newlyweds named Anita and Roger, they're kind of the main characters. They have 2 Dalmatian dogs that give birth to 15 Dalmatian puppies. Unfortunately, Cruella, who Roger and Anita knew because Anita used to go to school with Cruella, becomes fascinated in the Dalmatian puppies. Both films show that she'd like to skin them and use their fur for fashion. When Roger and Anita don't budge to hand her the puppies when she flashes money at them in order to buy them, she resorts to using her loyal henchmen to steal the puppies. And so Cruella de Vil has stolen about 101 Dalmatians in total, Roger and Anita's pups not being the only victims. But then the puppies escape while the henchmen hilariously fail at catching them. And then Cruella finds out about this and she goes to find the puppies herself, but it ends in her being squished under a pig, falling into a pit of molasses, and finally being arrested for theft, and most likely because of her intent to kill puppies in a very inhumane way.
And her name, Cruella de Vil, is actually a play on cruel devil. So, I mean, it's pretty clear that she was meant to be a really awful individual. So I'm wondering if there are any moments in the story that suggest to you that she does have some redeeming qualities. And then if so, what are those redeeming qualities that we can admire in her?
One that it can be kind of redeeming about her is just her ability to be incredibly honest and fearless with her bluntness and who she is. It's something that not a lot of people can pull off. And Cruella de Vil is, I think, someone who definitely can do that. So I guess just her ability at being a realist and being able to make peace with something that she is obsessed with. The other thing that's also very interesting about Cruella de Vil is just her ambition. But what's interesting is that she seems to have even more ambition than the main characters themselves. And the reason why I say that is because Anita and Roger, they find out in the movie that their puppies have been stolen. And they call the police. But then Roger, Anita, and their nanny sit in the house by themselves, chewing their nails, wondering, where are the puppies? But then Cruella de Vil, when she finds out that her henchmen failed at keeping the puppies at that abandoned house, she goes out there on her own in her fancy Volkswagen and tries to hunt down these puppies. She wants the puppies probably even more than Anita and Roger do at this point. And even though she gets sprayed by a skunk or these barn animals try and sit on her and whatnot, she still works really hard or does whatever she can to get these puppies. And I know that she applies this ambition to basically everything that she does. I mean, she's, a business leader in this fashion house. She has a lot of followers who are kind of afraid of her, and she gets what she wants, and when she wants it, she gets it. And so not only does she have just a lot of fearlessness with who she is and what she wants and what she's passionate about, but she also just has this great ambition that I think is even greater than what the main characters tend to have.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. Her ambition is definitely more inspiring than the other characters. Like Anita, for example, and I think we'll probably talk about this later on. She is a really talented artist in the 1996 film, and then she just leaves her job to go live at home where she already has a nanny. And it's like she's just throwing all her skill and talent away in order to do, as far as I can tell, nothing. Whereas Cruella, on the other hand, is going out and taking the things that she wants and using her power and ambition to be an awesome, successful person. So I think that's definitely something that we can look up to in her.
Right, definitely.
One thing that really struck me in the film as something to look at as an indication that Cruella isn't totally evil is that she seems to have some kind of connection with Anita. There is a little bit of a reference to the fact that Cruella and Anita were schoolmates at some point in time, but continually throughout the film, Anita is really tentative to say anything terribly bad about Cruella, even when Roger is calling her this terrible, evil person and writing terrible songs about her. Anita doesn't even want to believe that Cruella might have taken the puppies. So that makes me think that there's something about their history or something about her past that would lead Anita to believe that she is someone who does have a lot of redeeming qualities or isn't solely a terrible, heartless person.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of does seem that Anita is always giving Cruella the benefit of the doubt, even when Cruella waltzes into their house unannounced and asks about puppies. So that's very interesting, and because Roger doesn't know Cruella de Vil. This is like the one and only time that he's met her, so he obviously has a very negative perspective about Cruella de Vil. And yeah, you're right. That makes me think that maybe Anita feels like she owes her this benefit of the doubt. She owes Cruella this benefit of the doubt, maybe because she feels indebted to her about something that happened in school, or maybe Anita does believe that Cruella most of the time is a pretty decent person who usually you wouldn't really bat an eye about in normal life, but this just happens to be a moment in time where she does something kind of negative.
Right. And, if she is actually a totally terrible person now, which I'm not saying she necessarily is, what changed between when they were children and where they are now that hardened Cruella and made her into this strong, angry, powerful person?
Yeah. And maybe it's all Anita's fault. Who knows?
Yeah. I don't want to speculate too wildly, but I think it's definitely something that we can look to as evidence that there is more to Cruella than we see in the films. There's a depth to her that we're not quite introduced to, and that we shouldn't just assume that she is only a cruel devil.
Right. And in both of the films, you see Anita actually being very nice to Cruella during the whole time. And maybe that's just because Anita is a nice person and gives everyone the benefit of the doubt, even if they've committed murder or something. Who knows? But you're right. It does make you think a little bit harder as to why she does that and who Cruella was in the past.
So you talked a lot about how Cruella has this ambition, and you also mentioned that you kind of looked up to her a little bit when you were younger, and how you admired her. And because she is this powerful, ambitious woman, I'm wondering if you think Cruella could be a feminist or a feminist icon.
Yeah, that's a very good question. My answer is mostly maybe. A little hard to know, because first we have to kind of define feminism. Generally speaking, feminism is usually about actively striving for the equality of men and women. Not only that, but also striving for the equality and equity of women of color, of non-binary individuals, transgender individuals, all of that. But, the movies don't really give us as much context to get into the deeper roots of feminism. What I would say is that Cruella de Vil is ahead of her time in terms of how society views women during that time. So let me kind of throw in some context.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the 1996 version of the film, Cruella is a boss at this fashion company, and she makes high-end clothing. Anita works for Cruella de Vil, and Cruella praises her for her work in designing clothing. Cruella invites Anita to her office and continues to praise her for her hard work in the company, and basically says, "Oh, honey, don't squander your talent. You're doing great. You're a great designer. You're doing great work for me." And she kind of continues to ask Anita, "Would you ever leave this place for something else? Or how long have you worked for me? How long are you gonna work for me?" And Anita kind of says, "Well, I would probably leave if I had a man, if I were going to start a family." And then Cruella's like, "What? Like, why would you throw away your career for a man?"
Yeah, that was a particularly striking moment in that film to me, especially because when that moment happens, it's because she was out and about and she saw Anita's work, a fellow female employee at the company, and then immediately gave Anita all the credit for it, invited Anita to her office, wanted to show Anita that what she was doing was important and wanted Anita to have a future at her company. And then it must have been just so heartbreaking for Cruella to hear that Anita would throw all that away for a man, just give up all her talent. And now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if Cruella sees a little bit of herself in Anita, sees a younger her who was talented and then followed that talent into a powerful career. And now she's sad to see someone else who might just give all that up when she could be another powerful woman just like her.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And, you know, I think it's coming from a place that's good-hearted, actually. But then on the other side, you know, when you're thinking about feminism and what it means, it's a lot of it also has to do with respecting the choices of women. And if Anita truly chooses to stay at home while she has a baby and has a man and all of that, then who is Cruella de Vil to judge? I mean, if she makes that choice, then Cruella de Vil really just needs to let her do it if she were, you know, truly a feminist. That's
fair, but in Cruella's defense, Anita meets Roger and then marries him the next day.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would, you know, if she met Roger and then got to know him a little bit and then decided that he was a great guy and that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him and leave her job to be a stay-at-home mom, then I might have a little bit more respect for her. But I think it's really hard to make an argument in favor of quitting your career as a talented artist for a guy that you met yesterday.
Right. Yeah. Like anyone would be like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay. Look at your choices. Look at your life. Re-examine that.
Right. But no, I do see your point though, that, you know, Cruella, if she really was a feminist, maybe she should also be respecting the choices of the women around her and not just trying to force them into what she sees as the correct way to succeed.
Yeah. And then another thing I'm going to throw at you is, what if Cruella de Vil is only supporting and buttering up Anita because she found out she had a dog that has Dalmatian fur? Or what if...
Well, that's true.
Yeah. So her motivation is a little iffy at this point.
Right, but isn't the point of this podcast to speculate about the redeeming qualities of the villain?
Yes.
We're trying to find some reasons to actually like her, you know?
Yeah, that's true. And another thing that does make me like Cruella, too, is in the original book that was written in the 1950s, Cruella is married, but she doesn't, you know, let that hamper her from being a successful, very confident woman. And she actually has her husband take her last name, you know, crushing the patriarchal tradition of the wife taking the last name, which is very gutsy because we realize, so if the book was written in the 1950s, then most likely that story in the book took place in the 1950s. And for her to do that during that time period is fairly gutsy. Even today in 2018, sometimes when a woman says, I mean, it's more accepted now where if someone were to say, oh, I'm not taking my husband's last name, we'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. But among certain groups of people, even today, that's a little unheard of. Like, oh, how would you do that? You know, American culture is kind of weird like that. So the fact that she did that is really gutsy, and even just writing about that character during that time is very impressive. And so I just really admire Cruella when I heard about that fact about her.
Right. So in summary, she definitely has a lot of characteristics that women can look up to and can be viewed as positive, but it's complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated.
I also wonder if a man in a position like Cruella is in, we're acting in the same way that she's acting if we would judge her the same. Like, Cruella is seen as a terrible evil villain. She's actually ranked on IMDb's list of 100 greatest villains of all time. Would we consider her character traits to be so terribly evil if she were a man? Or do we consider them so evil because we're seeing a woman in that time and in that place acting in that way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think for her character, if she were a man, I think they would just make it look like the man was wanting to steal the puppies so that he could make money off of the fur.
And because she's a woman, it's about her vanity and not about her career and being successful.
Right. Like if she were a man, I think the audience would be more understanding about the motivation behind it. Like, this is for the money. I totally see that.
Yeah, like it's wrong. Yeah. It's wrong either way, but right. it's way more evil because a woman is doing it and because she loves fur coats and she's screechy and loud.
Mm-hmm. She was used a little bit to equate vanity and beauty and equate it to being evil and crazy.
Right.
So I think that definitely had a negative, could have a slightly negative impact on girls who are watching 101 Dalmatians when they're quite young, where they think, oh, she's so beautiful and powerful, but she's evil? Or this movie says that she's evil. These characters think that she's evil, but she's not always like that. So we have to stop equating that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. But yeah, that is a good question to keep pondering. And we still, don't 100% sure know whether she's a feminist. Just also to add to that feminist point, because, one definition of feminism is striving for the equality of men and women. Sometimes I think Cruella de Vil views women as actually superior to men. But I can also kind of see where she comes from in that sense, because she's surrounded by men that are kind of dumb. Like, she has her henchmen that don't really know how to do the job well. She's near a butler that doesn't really think very fast. So she's kind of surrounded by these men that are like not doing a whole lot and aren't as intelligent of her. So of course she's gonna think, oh, why would you throw away your whole life for these men that are bozos and don't really think very clearly? So I can totally see where she gets that. I don't think it's very feminist, but I can still understand why she would kind of look down on Roger and look down on Anita's decision.
Yeah. And she may have had to go through quite a bit of incompetent men in order to get to the position she's at. Or she may have had to see a lot of incompetent men succeed in a place where she may not have been able to do so quite as easily because she was a woman.
Yeah, she probably had to work, 10 times harder. And even when she did, she probably didn't always succeed because of the patriarchy.
It makes me wonder if the reason she is so aggressive is because she had to be in order to succeed in a male-dominated world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if she doesn't yell at that other guy to do what he's supposed to do, then how are they even going to listen to her?
Mm-hmm. Which, is, you could say, is sometimes true in the corporate world today, but I mean, this was the 1950s, so it must have been particularly difficult for someone like her to succeed.
Right.
And exactly. She does succeed, and that's, I think, probably pretty admirable.
Mm-hmm. She definitely does succeed in terms of her business and whatnot. Getting the puppies, no, but...
Yeah.
But in everything else in life, she does. So we probably shouldn't.
Her business is doing quite well without the puppies.
Yeah, she is. She's still looking mad fly, but she still strives for more. She doesn't settle for anything.
Good for her.
Yeah. Props to you. So now we can kind of move on to a different question that I have for Joe. So, in the movies, in both of the movies, Cruella de Vil seems pretty against animals in general. She thinks they're pretty gross unless they're fur on her, on her coat. So she even wants to kill and skin cute puppies, which sounds very terrible. Like, how can we even remotely justify Cruella de Vil in this sense?
Oh gosh. I have a lot of pretty complicated feelings about this. I'm a vegetarian for primarily environmental reasons, but also because of the animal industry and how, kind of terrible it is. So I feel that there is a hypocrisy in a world where it is okay to skin some animals but not others. And if you think that dog fur coats are so terrible, then you should also think that all other fur coats are terrible. And I would maybe even argue that you should also think that any kind of product that's taken from killing and abusing animals should be terrible. And I know a lot of people do have that opinion in the real world today, but a lot of people don't. And in the universe that Cruella lives in, fur coats they seem to be generally acceptable. Anita even admits that she would want a fur coat also if she was able to have one. It's just that the fur coat that Anita wants would be made out of an animal that she thinks is okay to kill. Like a rabbit or a mink or a fox or, something along those lines. So as evil as we think Cruella is, I wonder that if we took puppies out of the story and substituted them with rabbits or minks, if we would consider her to be quite as evil as she is now.
Right. And even viewing it from a cross-cultural lens too, if you go to a different culture, it's going to be vice versa. Maybe more okay to kill and wear one animal, but not the other. And so, society has decided that it's okay or that it's not okay to kill and wear certain animals. And I'm a meat eater, and I've also thought about the fact that I think I would be a hypocrite sometimes if I were to say, oh, they're going to kill those dogs and use them for fur. I kind of felt that I was a bit of a hypocrite because I allow cows and other animals to be killed. And just today I ate meat. So it's definitely kind of a controversial thinking, but something that we also need to think about. And the fact that the main reason why she's considered evil in this movie could still be contested. And
right.
Yeah.
And if she was stealing animals like rabbits from a rabbit farm instead of a home, we probably would have not thought of her as such a terrible person. We probably would have thought she's terrible because she's stealing this other person's property. But if they were going to be farmed to be used for an appropriate reason, or a reason that we feel is more appropriate, that really the worst thing she does is she steals someone else's property.
Right. Which really isn't as evil as we originally thought she would be.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably not top 100 IMDb villains of all time,
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's crazy because my first car is a Pontiac Grand Am. It had leather seats in it. Well, I don't know if it's real or fake leather though. But yeah, just the fact that, like, if she stole cows, she stole 5 cows from this farmer, it would just be a movie called 5 Cows and it'd be the most boring thing ever because we probably wouldn't feel anything for the cows.
Right. We'd be like, maybe she should have got her own cows or paid for them.
Right.
But other than that, like, oh, she's a robber.
Yeah. And I think what people don't like the most, though, even if they are meat eaters, is that they think, oh, those henchmen, they are going to, in a very inhumane way, kill those puppies and then use them for fur. Because I think as a meat eater myself, I can kind of say, like, you know, sometimes meat eaters, we kind of think like, we pretend that we know that the cow that we're eating was killed in a very humane way, but we actually don't fully know that.
Right. And
yeah, but we think that.
I think a lot of vegetarians would argue that that's actually incorrect, that most animals that we eat are killed in terribly inhumane ways. And you could probably make an argument that if the henchmen were to kill those puppies, it would be far more humane than what's happening to a lot of the animals that we eat today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's okay to kill puppies, but I'm saying it might have been a little more humane. At least they were treated well up until this point. Mm-hmm. They'll probably be killed in an instant.
Right. Yeah. Definitely a lot to think about in terms of that. And who knows, maybe I'll become a vegetarian because you and I have thought about this so deeply now, Joe. Stay tuned.
Good, great. I'm totally on board. And before I say anything else that's going to upset people about killing puppies, I think that we should probably wrap it up there. And head into the last part of our podcast where we share literary pieces that are written about our villains.
Yeah, so each episode we share a literary piece. It could be anything, like maybe it's a poem or a monologue. And we share these literary pieces to add additional insight to the character that oftentimes a conversation cannot.
Yeah. And today we're going to be sharing a poem actually written by you, Tiana. And the piece is written from the perspective of Cruella de Vil. And the title of the piece is Cruella de Void.
Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil. If she doesn't scare you, no evil thing will. To see her is to take a sudden chill. Cruella, Cruella. Window curtains drape across my Persian Sirok rug in the bedroom. The bare head above my bed frame is my protector of the night. My bedtime routine includes my henchmen washing my face to clear out my pores, a personal percussionist to help chime my way to sleep, and a maid to smooth out my comforter that took 20 rabbits to sew. I am the worst, but I am also the best. My walk is as fierce as if I split open the Red Sea with satin leather heels. Every time I trot on London streets, you tell your children not to end up like me. I am a jailbreaker ahead of my time. I strut in the path of suburban sidewalks that are tired of the housewife's cackles in the morning. A pair of pliers bred your last logical reason for looking. I know you cook by the stove. Your only subconscious wish is to be me. You cook the meatloaf for the 3rd time this week. You think, if only if you were as free. You are the neighborhood's trophy of hushed whispers during your summer porch get-togethers. I am every one of your guests' secret daydreams on lonely Sunday afternoons. God only gives us wings when we are ambitious enough to use them. Each day is a flight worth taking. The wind between the feathers I wear brushes off any ounce of care. I lie in bed by myself, emitting independence toward the sky. Each night I feel a calming breeze, knowing the only love I need is the comfort of rabbit fur beside me. How content I am in the basket of luxury. But certain nights are different. I smoke long parliaments in bed, hoping the hours pass by quickly. The memories are movie screens that flash on the ceiling at 3 a.m. The letters, the war, the Suez Canal. His sacrifice for them meant blood draining down the sand. The war never blamed the Italians enough. The only human I will ever love. He was a dust in a forgotten air, a piece of filth in the quicksand of defeat. He was a dog on a stick, Only the tags around his corpse shed light on his name. The day the police in hats took my doorstep is the day I decided life had to be mine to own. The cannons in 1940 killed my reason to give precedence to those who are not human. If you yearn to keep your animals safe, clean, and dry, why didn't you people yearn to save the person worth being good and tame for? So I married the other one and gained 5 bank accounts. The clock has seen how often I stare at the fireplace glistening in the dark. I work on forgetting late-night disparities for good. In the meantime, I step into polar bear and yearn to wear Dalmatian as if I own the world. She's like a spider waiting for the kill. Look out for Cruella de Vil.